The Moreno family reunion was already in full swing when I pulled into the villa's gravel driveway in Santa Fe, 40 minutes late, intentionally. At 38, I'd learned the hard way that showing up early only gave people more time to underestimate you. These gatherings were always about the success stories. My cousins with dual degrees, high-rise condos, and glossy Instagram careers. I stepped out of my rented Jeep in a sand-colored blazer and jeans, clean, deliberate, and nothing like the designer labels lining the wraparound porch. "Savannah, finally," my Uncle Raphael called from the adobe archway, his tone dry. "We've already started the toast." I gave him a tight smile. "Had to finish a client call," I replied. Technically true. I'd just wrapped up a quarterly debrief with my international M&A team. "Still juggling those odd jobs?" he asked, already looking over my shoulder for someone more impressive. Before I could answer, Lila swept in beside me. At 41, she was the family's gold standard. Managing director of Moreno Capital Group, the firm our grandfather founded. "Savannah," she said coolly, air kissing both cheeks. "We just celebrated a $62 million 0 cents Series D close." She scanned my outfit like she was checking inventory. "Still consulting from cafes?" "Still helping small firms scale," I replied lightly. She smirked. "You know, if you ever want stability, we're always hiring junior partners. Great exposure for someone rebuilding their path." I nodded, but inside, I nearly choked on my laugh. Over the last 6 years, I had quietly grown Polaris Horizon, a discreet acquisition firm registered under 4 international holding names. We specialized in acquiring legacy firms burdened by internal inefficiencies, including, as of last month, Moreno Capital Group. "I'm good where I am," I said calmly. Lila tilted her head, patronizing. "Well, if you ever want to be part of something real," I smiled. "You already are." As I followed them into the adobe glass tasting room, my phone buzzed. A message from my chief of staff lit the screen. "Final signatures in, full control confirmed. Congratulations, Ms. Reyes." I slipped the phone back into my pocket and let a slow smile stretch across my face. Let the family reunion begin. "Savannah!" Uncle Mateo called from the cheese board like I hadn't been a ghost at the last 5 events. "Come here, let me get a look at you." I crossed the patio with a glass of rosé in hand, bracing myself. "Still bouncing between clients, huh?" he asked, grinning as he tapped my shoulder. "I'm doing just fine, Uncle," I said evenly. "Fine?" He laughed. "In the Moreno family, we aim for empires. Look at Lila, running expansion like she's already on the Forbes board. And Dante just landed senior counsel at a federal firm. That's legacy." I nodded, lips tight, thinking of the acquisition dossier zipped inside my crossbody bag. Polaris Horizon's newest trophy, Moreno Capital Group. Signed this morning. Speaking of momentum, Lila joined us, teeth gleaming. "Did you hear about our upcoming acquisitions? 3 boutique finance firms in Arizona and Colorado. Niche, but scalable. We're about to dominate the Southwest market." She didn't know 2 of those firms had already accepted discrete buyouts from Polaris shell corporations. And the third? Days away from announcing a merger with my holding company. "How exciting," I murmured. "Dad's betting we'll hit $1 billion in managed assets next fiscal," she added proudly. "We're taking the Moreno name national." I took a slow sip of wine, remembering the report waiting in my inbox. A forensic audit of Moreno Capital's books. Overstretched, vulnerable, about to implode. "Savannah," my mother appeared beside me, her tone hopeful. "Your cousin Emilio just made Forbes Latinx Future 50. Isn't that lovely?" "Very," I nodded. Though I also knew his publicist had submitted the entire pitch. "You had so much promise at Vanguard," my mother sighed. "Everyone thought you'd be the next Latina to break Wall Street wide open." I left that world 6 years ago, and not because I couldn't keep up. I saw through the noise. While they polished resumes and posed for panels, I was quietly building Polaris Horizon. Today, we control over $50 billion 0 cents in assets spanning 4 continents. Times change, Mom. Before she could reply, Lila raised her glass with a wide, gleaming smile. "Big announcement," she declared. Moreno Capital is going public next month. Initial valuation, $4 billion. Cheers and clinks followed. Uncle Mateo shouted, "Now that's a legacy." And my cousin Dante started talking about buying a second vacation home in Palm Springs. Villa turned to me with mock kindness. "You should get in early, Savannah. Might help you finally build something of your own." I thought of the executive floor in our Mexico City office, still buzzing, as my team prepared tomorrow's investor reveal. "I'll keep that in mind," I said coolly. Behind me, I caught Aunt Mariela's whisper to my mother. "She just never got traction, did she?" My mother sighed. All those degrees and nothing to show for it. No husband, no home, no real title. I glanced at my phone. There it was. Final sign-offs complete. Global press release queued for 9:00 a.m. Right on schedule. Lila noticed. "Work emergency," she teased. "Another little client in crisis?" "Something like that," I smiled, sipping slowly. "Actually, Lila, I've been meaning to ask. What's Moreno Capital's strategy for the Southeast Asia Fund? I heard there were disruptions in the microchip chain." Her eyes flickered. Just for a second. "That's not public information," she said sharply. "Where did you hear that?" "Oh," I replied, letting the weight of silence settle. "You'd be surprised what floats through our world, especially with IPOs in motion." Lila stiffened. "Everything is under control. The listing is proceeding exactly as planned." What Lila didn't know was that Polaris Horizon had spent the last 12 months acquiring majority stakes in 3 of Moreno Capital's key suppliers and quietly buying out 2 of their major creditors. We weren't just watching their IPO. We were positioning to control it. "Of course," I said, voice velvet smooth. "I'm sure everything will go just the way it's meant to." The night continued with champagne toasts, bloated egos, and an endless loop of thinly veiled jabs tossed in my direction. I let them pass, sipping slowly, my face a calm mask. As the last of the guests wandered toward their Teslas and black Escalades, Leela leaned closer, voice syrupy. "You know, Savannah, there's still a place for you at Moreno Capital. Entry level, of course, but we take care of our own." I looked at her carefully. "You're absolutely right, Lila. Family should look out for family." She laughed, oblivious. "What could you possibly teach me about business?" "You'd be surprised," I murmured, checking my phone. "Every deal, every vote, every transfer." Greenlit. The next morning, I sat alone in my penthouse above downtown San Francisco. The city shimmered gold in the rising light. Coffee untouched. Focused. Then the alerts started flooding in. Polaris Horizon secures controlling interest in Moreno Capital. Board restructured. IPO halted. Marie, my executive assistant, appeared in the doorway. "Press release is live. All board members have signed off. You're officially chair." I adjusted the cuff of my tailored navy suit. Chanel, of course. My rare splurge for moments like this. And Lila? At headquarters, finalizing the IPO conference, scheduled for 9:30 a.m. I gave a quiet, knowing smile. That press conference won't be happening. Right then, my phone buzzed. A message from Lila. "Still time to invest before we go public? Family rates, of course." I didn't reply. Opened my laptop instead. Polaris Horizon acquires controlling interest in Moreno Capital. Effective immediately, executive leadership has been reassigned by unanimous board approval. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the news broke. Screens across my office lit up like wildfire. Breaking: Moreno Capital acquired in hostile takeover. IPO plans collapse as Polaris Horizon assumes control. Mystery firm exposed. Who is Savannah Reyes? My phone lit up with pings and vibrations. 8 missed calls from Lila, 12 from Uncle Mateo. Even Dante had sent 3 voice messages. The group chat was in meltdown. At 9:15, Marie reappeared in the doorway. "They're here, all of them, in the private elevator lobby." I didn't need names, already knew. "Send them up." Lila stormed in first, heels clicking, blazer twisted, eyeliner smudged. "What the hell did you do?" she hissed. "This is criminal. We were supposed to go public today." Uncle Mateo followed, red-faced, fists clenched. Get me the CEO of Polaris Horizon. I want them here, now. I stood from my desk. You're speaking to her. Silence. Heavy, unmistakable silence. Lila blinked, her lips parted, but no words came. Uncle Mateo dropped into a leather chair like someone had knocked the wind out of him. My mother stepped forward, visibly shaken. This not possible, Lila whispered. I walked slowly around the desk, the San Francisco skyline glowing behind me. Is it? I said. Polaris Horizon, founded 6 years ago, now manages over $50 billion, 0 cents in assets, global operations, quiet acquisitions, surgical precision. I met each of their stunned gazes. And as of this morning, it manages your legacy too. I paused at the head of the room, voice low and steady. Known for dismantling over-leveraged investment firms just before their peak. Sound familiar? You're. Dante finally choked out, staring at me as if I'd sprouted wings. You're her. The one they call the Ghost CEO. The Phantom of Finance. The very same, I replied smoothly, reaching for the navy leather folder resting beside my laptop. Lila, I said, holding it out, would you like to see the real numbers, not the PR gloss you've been feeding your investors? Her hand trembled as she took it, flipping through page after page of deeply audit data, unfiltered reports, and internal emails. Her face went pale. These are internal. These were secure. How? Your semiconductor pipeline in Vietnam is crumbling, I said, tone steady. Your Asia growth forecasts were inflated by a third-party consultant with forged credentials, and 3 of your senior VPs began quietly dumping their equity shares 6 months ago. She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. Shall I go on? Uncle Mateo finally growled from behind her. Now you listen here, young lady. No, I said, calm but firm. You listen. You all built this fantasy of an untouchable Moreno dynasty, but it was just that, a fantasy. I tapped the corner of my desk. The wall of monitors behind me lit up, screen by screen with charts, cash flow breakdowns, SEC alerts, and firm-wide risk assessments. The true valuation of Moreno Capital is $1,760,000,000, 0 cents, not 4. Your IPO dreams were propped up by strategic leaks, speculative media, and blind optimism. That IPO? It's not delayed, it's over. Lila sank into a nearby chair, her composure dissolving into silence. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this to us? I exhaled softly. To us? This is the same family that laughed when I left Vanguard, that offered me internships while I was building an empire behind a VPN. We were just trying to help, my mother said faintly, wringing her hands. No, I said, you were trying to shrink me, to package me into something predictable. I stepped closer, my voice low but unwavering. Success isn't about playing by your rules. It's about rewriting them. Uncle Mateo glared. So this is revenge? This is business, I said coolly. Polaris Horizon acquires underperforming, overvalued firms and reshapes them into something scalable. That your firm just happens to share my last name? Well, that's poetic coincidence. Dante adjusted his cufflinks, jaw tense. The board will never let this stand. They already did, I replied, unanimously. I nodded toward their buzzing pockets. Check your phones. Right on cue, a symphony of vibrations echoed around the room. Screens lit up with breaking news, financial alerts, analyst breakdowns, live market data. Moreno Capital's stock was plummeting. Lila looked up, the blood drained from her face, eyes rimmed in smudged mascara. You've destroyed everything. No, I said evenly. I've saved you from yourselves. Polaris Horizon specializes in restructuring bloated legacy firms like yours. In 6 months, Moreno Capital will be leaner, smarter, and healthier than it's been in a decade. Just not under Moreno leadership. My mother's voice cut through the tension, quiet and shaken. And what happens to us? I pressed another key. The wall of screens refreshed, displaying contract buyouts, valuation summaries, and transition schedules. You'll all receive market rate compensation for your shares. Executives will be offered generous severance. Then I let a faint smile curl at the corner of my lips. And for anyone interested in starting over, I might have a few entry-level roles. Great learning environment. Room to grow? The silence that followed felt like a vacuum. Lila stood abruptly, yanking her purse over her shoulder. "You won't get away with this," she spat, brushing past Dante on her way out. I leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "I already have." They left slowly, Dante typing frantically, Uncle Mateo ushering a broken Lila toward the elevator. My mother paused at the threshold. "All this time," she whispered. "You were building this?" I nodded. "While you were busy being ashamed of my so-called consulting gigs." She looked down, hands trembling. "I don't even know who you are anymore." "No," I said quietly. "You never did." Once they were gone, I crossed the room to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below me, San Francisco pulsed with light and ambition, mirroring the hum now running through Polaris horizon. Marie stepped in, holding a fresh cup of coffee. "Security credentials revoked. Transition teams are already at Moreno Capital HQ. In the press?" I asked, taking the mug. "Half the financial world wants to know who the Phantom of Finance is. Some are starting to suspect a family tie." I smiled. "Let them speculate. The numbers will speak louder than any headline." My phone buzzed again, a final message from Lila. "I hope you're satisfied. You've torn this family apart." I responded simply. "No, Lila. I just showed you what real success looks like." In the months that followed, Polaris Horizon rebuilt everything Moreno Capital had nearly collapsed. The stock, after its initial nosedive, stabilized, then soared, not from media fluff or name prestige, but from solid strategy and clean governance. I kept my word about the job offers. Dante joined Polaris's legal department. Entry level, but he's adjusting. Fast learner. Lila refused hers. Pride remains her armor. But Uncle Mateo shocked everyone, accepting a senior advisor role. Once he stopped quoting family history, he proved surprisingly valuable. The man understands infrastructure better than anyone I've met. The next Moreno family gathering happened at the usual spot. Abuela Rosa's old ranch outside Santa Fe. Same tables. Fewer people. The wine still flowed, but the air was quieter. Less boasting, more listening. And me? I sat where I always had, on the edge, watching. Near the end, Lila approached. No designer heels this time, no venom in her voice. "I've been thinking," she said softly, "about what you said, about what real success means." She hesitated. "That position you mentioned, is it still open?" I studied her for a beat. The pride in her voice was gone. What remained was curiosity, and something like humility. "Come by the office Monday," I said. "We'll talk." Driving back through the high desert that night, I thought about how the Moreno family had always defined success. Media clout, expensive shoes, and performative power. But I'd learned success could be quieter, found in stability, in building, in knowing who you are, even when no one's clapping. The next morning, I arrived early at Polaris Horizon. Our logo shimmered in the rising sun, etched in steel and glass. 40 stories below, workers were dismantling the final Moreno Capital placard from the lobby wall. Marie handed me my coffee. "Board meeting at 10. Next acquisition is on deck." I smiled. "Perfect. Let's redefine success again." If you've ever been the quiet one in the room, the one they overlooked, the one they called naive, the one they left out of the photo, then you already know how my story feels. I didn't shout to prove my worth. I built something that couldn't be ignored. So if you've had to rise in silence, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. Tell me when you stopped asking for permission and started making moves.